Welcome to Pre-Shift, tidbits of wisdom for everyday service. My name is TJ Griffin, and I'm the corporate wine educator for Winebow. We welcome and encourage your questions at any point during the webinar, but please use the Q&A rather than the chat bar to submit them. Let me introduce your host. Master Sommelier Ron Edwards is the husband of one wife, the father of 5 girls, a surfer, and a lover of all things bow tie. He has over 29 years of hospitality experience, and since 2018, he has been the Director of Wine Education for Winebow. And now here to discuss today's topic is the second of the 5 P's of hospitality, promotion, Master Sommelier Ron Edwards.
Awesome. Thank you, TJ. You get better at that every week. I start to feel like I actually am famous for the way you introduced me. That's a good feeling. Thank you. So as we get going today, I want to remind everybody that this particular series of webinars, the 5 Ps, we are going to want participation from you out in the audience. So plan to put not just questions, but even comments as we go through these examples, these case studies, and we're talking about promotion. We really want you to go to the Q&A and put in comments. You can put in questions. You can put in both. And we can sort of have a back and forth without opening up the audio, which can be a little clumsy at times. And we're going to get started with the idea of the purpose of promotion. But I decided this week that I should share with you an old client's promise development so that you could sort of see from last week's webinar how this reality comes together, because there's this idea maybe that I left with you that the promise could be one sentence. It might be if you distill it beautifully, you might end up with one sentence, but it's still going to have ideas that come from that one sentence that you need to make sure that you're telling the public. And so let's go to the next slide and talk about, purpose of promotion, which, I don't think this is rocket science to anybody or new information, because the purpose of promotion is really to simply say what your promise is. Tell people this is what you're going to get when you get here. This is the feeling we want you to have. This is the activity you're going to be involved in. These are the kind of menu items you would expect here. These are the kind of rooms you will stay in. Whatever your business is entailing, the idea of promotion is to make sure that people know it, and not only make sure they know it, but to pull the client to you and get them into your doors, or actually, if it's a digital business to a certain degree, you could pull them into your digital world so that they order from you. I know a lot of restaurants and chefs have moved to, I can't have people in a dining room now, so I'm going to create a food to go service or an online ordering service. And all of those things still need promotion, and they still need a clear promise to promote. And so this is super important, but it isn't easy, right? And so it's really important that we acknowledge how difficult it is, but we also come to the table ready to talk about something that is really meaningful. So let's start the discussion today with a previous case study. This is an example of where my business partner and I worked with a restaurant that knew they needed a difference going forward. They had not hit their stride like they expected. They did not get the reaction from the public that they thought. And one of the things that my old consulting business did would take people from where they were and move them forward. If that meant from a startup initial thought process to final process, great. But most of our clients came to us because they realized something was wrong and they wanted to fix it. And they had already gotten most of the way through or halfway through or even all the way into launch, and they weren't getting the results they were looking for. So this concept was a restaurant that came out of a chef's mind. The chef was born in Guadeloupe, and he thought somewhat French, right? I mean, he grew up in a French-speaking country, and he loved this idea of the word fufu, which is loosely translates to crazy, crazy. It also has this connotation to the flight and the sound of a hummingbird. So he picked a logo of a hummingbird and he put fufu in the title of his business, which in the northern Michigan market meant nothing. They The client didn't know what to expect from a restaurant with fufu in the title. It was too close to our U.S.-based terminology, frou-frou, which is often slang for too fancy or whatever. And so we needed to reimagine how to promise and what to promise for his business. And so my partner and I worked together with him, and we tried to get him into a new promise. And the new promise was more like this. His story is a Northern Michigan story. It's a crazy one. Northern Michigan is rich with French origins and explorer heritage. There is a gold mine of French connection history right here into which no other business has tapped. And that was true at the time. At the same time, the current market driver of local is huge here. This particular town was super shop local, eat local, shun chains kind of thing. And it continues to grow. Therefore, we will reimagine fufu by making the crazy but totally authentic connections between Northern Michigan and France by way of the explorer, by way of the Great Lakes, by way of the ocean, and by way of French Caribbean, because of course, this particular man was born in the French Caribbean. We will seek to create a more dynamic, community-driven, familial social experience that ranges from espresso to wine to an elegant dinner. People drop in just to say hi to their friends and to the owner. We will be a concept-driven restaurant, not a personality-driven restaurant, because the owner's sustainability and the restaurant's sustainability needs the owner not to have to be there all the time for success. We will create a more comfortable, most comfortable and approachable wine bar experience for the region. We will create two wholly distinct experiences and entities, the wine bar and the restaurant. Fufu will remain fufu. The wine bar will have a distinct yet complementary name and identity. We will define sophisticated crazy. It will be posh elegance with bright sparks of comfortable and casual whimsy. It has energy and motion. We will embrace crazy, but we will define it to suit us. French will be secondary to comfortable and whimsical. It's primarily great comfort food that happens to be French inspired. And we will develop a new authentic descriptor to replace classic French bistro, because in reality, the restaurant was not promising that because it couldn't deliver that. All right, so that was the promise. And then we had to take that promise and figure out how to promote it. All right, there's a lot of avenues there. There's a lot of different thought processes there. And as you can see from how simple we made the case study last week for Spring Hill Suites, that is not a simple case study, right? There's a lot going on here, and mainly because there was a lot of things to work with. So the promotional aspect here, we went into this idea. And that one, first of all, let's just talk about promotion. Promotion is endless. And I mean that in several different ways. Promotion options are nearly endless. The channels that you can promote, it just goes on and on and on. I'll give you a short list here in a few minutes. Choosing the correct options requires the input of an experienced professional. I'm not that person. I worked with that person. I'm not that person. You really have to invest your money well to get the right return. And in order to do that, you really need to not shortchange yourself on the person that's helping you making these decisions, because, you can dump a lot of money in promotion and advertise. A lot of people get discouraged about advertising with. So once you figure out the correct channels, the options are selected and the actual message can still fall short. So we've got to have the right channels. We got to have the right message that sounds like our promise in the ears of the listener, in the eyes. It looks like our promise to the eyes of the person seeing. And you must be clear and attractive. So note that the not only are the options endless, like so many channels, so many things to say, got to keep it right, but the need is endless. You can't stop promotion once you start. And you should start. There doesn't come a time in the business's life that it no longer needs to be promoted, because as soon as you stop promoting, you stop telling new potential clients what they should expect and why they should be there. And that's never a good idea, which means the cost is endless, but it has to be part of your business model. It has to be part of your expenditures every year. And it can be painfully expensive. So you need to do it wisely. and do it carefully, but you do need to do it. So let's go back to the concept that I was bringing up about this Northern Michigan restaurant. And so the goal here in our promotional efforts was to separate, this owner had two restaurants, to separate the two so that the promotion was not about shared identity, because they really weren't shared identity. They weren't similar concepts. They, other than the ownership was the same, there really was no need to promote them together. So we wanted to create one or more unique, consistent branded experiences at the wine bar. So one of the local bakeries up north had created the 3 o'clock baguette, a reason to drop by at 3 o'clock, because that's when the baguettes came out. It was brilliant promotional opportunity. We were going to do something like that, like the 3 o'clock flight to France. And every day we'd have a feature of French wine by the glass that people could come in and enjoy. Play up the owner's connection and his study under Paul Bocuse, because he was he studied under him and worked for him for quite a while. We will coordinate regular radio advertisements on both NPR and regular talk radio, because we felt like our audience was split between the two of those, and put 2 to 3 billboard installations in the city with the same messaging on everything. 12-month campaign. You can't dip your toe in the water with promotion, because that just guarantees failure. And we're going to use, the restaurant had an off-premise and on-premise license, so we were going to definitely use that to create a unique wine bar experience that blends the idea of coming to taste something with taking something home. And we were going to create a guerrilla one-to-one word of mouth marketing campaign just for downtown crowd in this particular city, to try and help understand that we were energizing and creating a new look and feel for this restaurant. And last but not least, the intent was to explore a creative concept or method to reinstate lunch. This is a restaurant that had sort of, like many who aren't exactly in the right place or perfectly suited to a rushed lunch, had given up on it for lack of a creative way to get it going. And we had thought of several ways to fix that. And that would have been another promotional arena, which, by the way, that's promoting something that actually brings in revenue. So that's a very good thing. You know, something along the lines like 30-minute wine lunch. In France, it takes 3 hours, but this is America, right? That's a good, solid, positive message. So let's move on to our first case study with that in mind. Anybody have comments or questions about all this crazy stuff that I listed and very fast about something that took a long time to develop and may or may not mean a lot to you?
Ron, I don't know if you're going to cover this or if you'll have time, but how do you create a word of mouth campaign around a restaurant or a wine bar?
That's a great question. You create it by a couple of things. One, you've seen this inside restaurants where they have you try to engage yourself with the restaurant, either by adding yourself to an emailing list or by the restaurant giving you something that goes with you, the to-go menus or whatever. We'd also talked about word of mouth advertising that was a sort of based on, for lack of a description, like going old school and putting flyers on cars. But the idea was to have our contacts in this town be very, very clear about what was about to happen and what was in the process, and make them our influencers. Because between my business partner and I, we knew a bunch of people in this town that were in the right crowd to let other people know. So if some of it was just going to be, my business partner and I talking to people. It was a small enough town to be able to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sweet.
And Troy also commented on that, create influencers and mavens, which I believe comes from the Malcolm Gladwell Tipping Point book. Was that the first time that those terms were introduced to the world?
That'd be a good question for Troy.
All right, we'll save that for another.
I haven't read Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point yet. You got me on that one. I've heard many things about it, all of which were good, and it's on the long-term reading list, but I haven't gotten to it yet. That must have been in the chat window because I didn't see it come up in the Q&A. All right, so let's go here. So we're back to Spring Hill Suites. All right. And last week we talked about them and what their promise might be and what we expected them. And TJ, do you remember what you felt like their promise would be?
Yes, slightly upscale business travel, a little different, not as stuffy, little hipper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, business travel on a budget, so to speak, but not one of those places you go and go, I don't know if I want to stay here. It makes you feel like you're got a higher per diem for your travel than you actually do, but you don't get concierge service. You don't get, bellhops. You don't get all the stuff that you get at a fancy hotel. And remember, their tagline is a little extra, a lot less ordinary. All right. So this was the image we looked at last week. It's a great time for everybody in the audience to be putting things into the Q&A about whether they are promoting themselves in a way that lives up to the promise. But I wanted to add a new image to that. So I went a little deeper into their website because obviously they hook you in with this image. They want you to make a reservation. If you know the product well, you're jumping in there. But let's pretend we did know the product and we start exploring through the website. Look what I found on the second page. All right. So this isn't about the Marriott Bonvoy membership. This is them living into the promise of a little extra, a lot less ordinary. Okay. So first they have this sort of credo, like we heard from Ritz Carlton. They're basically stealing a page out of Ritz Carlton, and treating others like we'd like to be treated has always been our guiding principle. And then you can explore that more if you like. Kickback in style. We've partnered with West Elm to bring you smart design for modern living. I don't know what that means, but okay. Now, obviously, Spring Hill Suites has intentionally tried to create a hotel where somebody can travel for business, have a place to work, have enough space to be comfortable, and not break the bank. And then last but not least, right here in this trio, notice that it's a trio. I mean, things look better in threes, right? The gallery wall. So with Society 6, we've curated 10 regional art collections on display in our lobbies. So in what way are these three things living into that tagline, that promise that they're making, a little extra, a lot less ordinary? What do you think, Sharon, Ted, Parker, Laura? I see you out there. Of course, you might be driving, in which case don't respond. That would be bad. Any thoughts, TJ?
Yeah, like they're getting smart design. They're having art. It's a little that you don't see that in your typical business travel hotel. So they're giving you a little extra, a little out of the ordinary, a little more than you perhaps even thought you might want, just to make the experience a little better. And
I didn't look. Yeah, over deliver on expectations for sure, Troy. What's that old famous success point, right? Under promise and over deliver. The old, for those of us who are Star Trek fans, it's the Mr. Scott approach, right? Captain Kirk would call down in the great emergency and tell him he needed to get out of here or do this or do that. And Scotty would tell him, I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. And then he'd get 10 or 20 or 30% more and they'd all be fine. He was the master. His character was the master of the under promise and over deliver. So he always looked like a miracle worker. Yeah. Okay. So Troy's throwing out here to lean into the tone of voice. Each MI brand has a distinct tone of voice. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's part of your tone of voice is an extension of your promise, right? And I think that's a good statement for each of us to think about as we move into these next case studies. It's like, all right, what's the tone of voice here? And I think we picked up on them last week, but it'd be great to talk about them this time, not last week, but last episode. All right, so they are bringing in through these three images that either their designs are so popular that they have made, they've partnered with somebody to actually sell you these designs for your own use. That's image number two, right? Or the inverse, they're so desirous of you to have a great experience in the hotel and feel modern and functional that they're partnering with this company to give you that experience in the hotel. And the last one, yeah, how many affordable business travel hotels have art galleries as installed in the lobbies. Not very many, right? So a little bit extra for sure. All right, let's move on to this next case study. And, you know, every major brand has holes perhaps in its promotion and so forth. But, you know, if we look to the big boys, you know, Marriott International, and that's what the MI stood for before, but it is a hallmark brand. And they have spent so much time and money on this kind of information. So it's a good place to go and say, all right, well, if we had $1 million to promote our business, what would it look like? And you can look at Marriott International Properties for some of that. All right, let's look here. So this was our yeah, go ahead, TJ.
Just on that last slide, because we had a comment, and I was thinking sort of the same thing. It's from Laura. I do gather the intention, the tone of the concept, and I do like it. I would love for the imagery to attract me a bit more. I feel like they are not quite parallel. And I had sort of that same slight disconnection. Yeah, not jarring, but just a little bit.
Yeah, I totally get that, because and a part of that is I took a slice out of the middle of the web page. This isn't the whole web page. I just wanted to be able to read these, and in order to do that, I had to take a smaller picture. When you took it as part of the whole web page, it still had the same colors and imagery below it. It was a little better than what her perception. But what's important to me, and that you brought it up, TJ, is that she's looking at that, and that's great, because that critical eye is really going to help.
Right.
All right. Here we go. So we're going to move into this one. Remember, this one is the local. There are 5 of these, 5 or 6 locations of the Taza Kitchen, right? We looked at this last week. We dissected this image like, wow, this is crazy. You know, I thought they had a great wine program, but all they want to talk about is cocktails. We went into all of that, right? But remember, I just want to pull you into this remembrance, is that wood-fired cooking, serious libations, right? A very simple indication of what you're looking for. And then we read through their About Us page, which was basically a paragraph talking about how their concept was driven by trips to Baja, Mexico, the Amalfi Coast. They fell in love with traditional wood-fired cooking and casual, and trying to get you into this promise that if you come here, TJ nailed it. Remember, what are you expecting when you come here?
Wood-fired pizza and delicious Mexican tapas and some cool cocktails and hopefully some wine as well.
And also we noticed, we said, and casual, right?
Yes.
Don't have to dress up. This is a kind of an everyday kind of experience, so to speak. And all of that's sort of laid out in their paragraph. So not being able to access like their advertising in magazines and stuff like that and pull this in here, I tried to find another part of their promotion online that would speak to them trying to live into this promise. And so I'm going to switch screens here, hopefully successfully. And I'm going to show you another part of their website. So they talk about how their restaurant is inspired by this travel, right? Well, there's the travel section on the website. And what they have done is they have created a space on their website that chronicles the ownerships and key stakeholders' trips that are inspiring the menu and the flavor, quote unquote, of the restaurant every year. And so there's an entire section for each trip. Like there's one on Baja, Mexico. There's one on Campania, and there's one on another. I forgot the other one. So they have dedicated an entire part of their web presence to letting you know that we're serious about this. We're so serious about this. We took our team there, and this is what we experienced. So everybody can see this scrolling down. TJ, you can see this, right?
Yes.
And so they've got a video here that I'll just start it. I'm not going to let it run for very long, but they've created a video of what it's like in Campania and what they experienced while they were there and all that stuff, right? Showing that they were actually there. And then it's a photo gallery of all the places they went and the people they met, and trying to connect you a little bit to their story and their inferences. Like, who wouldn't want some of that? That shrimp dish is beautiful. Look at that. That's langostinos, I guess. And all the things that they experienced there that in theory, right, what they're promising you is we experienced this there and we're bringing it back to Virginia for you. I found this to be a very smart thing. Even if most of the audience that comes there doesn't find this section of the website, this is a promotable section of the website that even inside the restaurant, the servers can be talking about this. Hey, did you look at the photo display from the owner's trips to the Amalfi Coast or what have you? Hey, this dish came from the trip in 2018. The pictures are there. You can check it out. It's really cool. There's even a video to watch. Those kind of things can be promoted internally. And that kind of promotion, once it's built, kind of is self-sustaining, and I hate to say it's free, but it's about as cheap as it gets. Thoughts from the audience? Fun pictures, right? Makes me hungry.
Yeah, I have to remember to have a snack before these presentations.
Yeah, all I had was an espresso. I'm sure you can tell from my pattern of speech. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing that, come back to our regular display.
Troy makes a good comment on that that section of the website. The approach makes you feel like family. It makes, you're watching a slideshow from their vacation. So they're bringing you into their experience.
Yeah. And I really like that about that because, if your goal is to promise somebody that they're going to have an experience like you had when you were traveling, you have to figure out how to recreate that. Yes. But you have to figure out what that means as a promise too, and what words to use and what everything else that needs to happen so that you can, see it on the table. So now that we've seen that on the table or seen that on the thing, now we come back to this picture, TJ. And after seeing those pictures, do we feel like the front page of their website is living into, are these cohesive, right? Out there in the audience, is the image that we're looking at now cohesive with this display of a trip to Italy?
Ron, I was a little surprised by the Campagna section because on the one hand, it's cool. I like it. And it shows they're pretty serious about their food. Mm-hmm. But I thought of this prior to that as more of just an American hangout that had good food and pizzas and inspired by Italy, inspired by Baja. But the Campagna section makes me think it's a lot more serious. Yeah.
And I think that's good that they've put this in here because I think they're perfectly happy for you to think you're coming for an otherwise inspired American restaurant. But I think they want you to leave feeling like you got a taste of being there. And I think that's what that section of the website is for. And having eaten there a few times, I would say that they are doing their best to live into the idea of they're trying to honestly bring you a taste of Europe or Baja to the table. They don't pull it off in the service regimen because service in Europe is just different, right? It's not good, bad, and different, doesn't matter. It's just different. They approach it differently. It's a different kind of thing. But flavor-wise, they do a really good job of interpreting what they experienced and bringing it to us. So let's go back to our gold standard. All right. So we visited the Ritz Carlton last time because I wanted to make sure we saw another example of someone whose imagery and words and photographs are really well chosen. There's this understated elegance. We're not trying too hard. We're not trying to prove it to you that much. It just is kind of feeling to their display. And we talked about their motto, right, of the Ritz Carlton Hotel Company. We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And when you look through their promotions, if you see anything on the Ritz Carlton, it will very much live into this credo, this motto. And so I thought I would expand it a little bit and see, it kind of helped the audience, if you haven't been there and you haven't looked this up, help all of you understand how they sort of integrate this and move it forward in not only their promotion, but how you experience it every day. If you make the decision to go there, how to make sure the promise doesn't fall short after they promised it to you in the promotion. And so there are, and this will fall into, we may hit this again when we get to persona, right? 3 steps of service. These are their non-negotiables, which is also part of their promise and also part of their promotion, because the interaction you get with a person in the building is also part of promotion, right, TJ? So a warm and sincere greeting, right? None of the half-hearted, they just don't live into the idea that you say hello to somebody just because they walked in. No, there's got to be a heart behind it. You should mean it when you say it. Use the guest's name. So they have developed systems so that you are never handed off to a person in the hotel that works with the hotel where the name is not transferred with you, so that when the bellhop greets you at the door and says, welcome, are you checking in? And you say yes, and they ask you your name, that name sticks with them and they transfer that. When they walk up to the front desk, they walk up to the front desk with you. They say to the front desk person, hey, Jane, this is Mr. Edwards. He's checking in. Jane looks up and says, hello, Mr. Edwards. Let me find your reservation for you. And it just goes on, hands you back off to someone who's going to take you to your room or not. And it's just crazy detailed and beautiful. And a fond farewell. You cannot leave the hotel without somebody speaking to you. I've tried just to see if I could. They just seem to have eyes everywhere. It's pretty amazing. The other thing is we've heard about, in the Michelin star system for hotels and restaurants, there's only 3, right? 1, 2, 3, and none. The mobile rating system is the diamond system, right? And so they are a 5 diamond property in almost every case. Well, they actually have what they call the 6th diamond. And this is part of their attempt to communicate with the guest as to what to expect and then live into it, right? The 6th diamond for this company is mystique, emotional engagement, and functional, which is kind of an odd thing, right? You got 2 that are very touchy-feely, and then you've got one that is extremely practical. And I just happen to love that, because if all you are is touchy-feely, you're probably going to miss something along the way of actually pulling it off. You're actually going to miss having the right equipment or making the room actually comfortable. It might be whimsical and mystique and emotionally engaging, but you lay down on the bed and it's like a rock, right? So not functional. So all of these things are part of their messaging. All of these things come into the way they talk about themselves, and I think they do it very well. Troy had lots of input there because I happen to know he's a Marriott International lifetime loyal guy. He's bringing up that, one of the things they do to message themselves is that they authorize every team member to spend $200 per person per day to make their guest visit incredible. And that means comping stuff or investing in something that's not even in the hotel if needed. And all of those various different things. All right. Let's go here. So we have Mateo. We talked about Mateo last time. Another example of we went from giant budget to local budget to giant budget to local budget, right? So there's a lot of information here that needs to be downplayed. All right. So last time we showed Mateo on their front page, we all decided that they did a really good job on the front page expressing that this is a Spanish tapas bar where you should drink wine, right? And then we looked at their messaging and the idea of how they describe themselves, and it reinforced once again that this is a Spanish tapas bar, Southern influenced, where you should drink wine and sherry. And so so I looked up one of their Facebook posts to see what they were doing on social media, because social media is obviously a very strong channel for most people these days. It can be less expensive advertising, and if it's done right, it's really effective. The problem is doing it right. So I'm not sure if everybody can read this on whatever device they're on, so I'll read it to you. So this is just one of their posts from a day. But have you tried our cheeseburger tortilla española yet? Think a Spanish take on the American classic with egg, French fried potatoes, ground beef, American cheese, and ketchup aioli. Cut it, stack it, smash it. And the picture. So based on what we found last time, where do we see in this particular promotion them living into their promise? And are there any disconnects? I'm going to point out one that maybe people aren't catching. It caught my eye immediately. Look at the napkin and the silverware. TG, what do you notice about the napkin and the silverware?
It's a little rumpled. Like it's just been used.
Yeah, used or what? Just laid there, right?
Yeah.
Isn't the feeling of that the antithesis of the picture of the Ritz Carlton promotion?
Oh, absolutely.
And why is that important? What do we decide from the front page of their website about what to expect here stylistically?
You're not going to be able to have a quiet conversation here. You're going to be sharing a lot of plates. It's loud. It's fun.
It's casual, right?
Casual. Yeah, absolutely.
Food is really detailed, but you don't have to dress up. So once again, in the picture that they've chosen for this Facebook post, which I admire the choice of picture here, they have carefully staged it to remind you, you're going to share these plates. You're going to have wine. There's one sitting right there, right? Actually looks like maybe a bottle of cava, or a half bottle of cava, more to the point. And don't get dressed up. We're going to give you a tea towel and some silverware and have at it. If they had neatly folded that napkin, it would have been out of place in that picture.
It's a subtle touch, but yeah, absolutely.
And it was the one part of the picture that I had the greatest admiration for, because it's a subtle detail that somebody with a designer's eye and really intelligent photography set that up. And not everybody thinks of that kind of stuff. I used to work with a guy that thought of that kind of stuff, and he trained me to look for that kind of stuff. I'm still nowhere near him, but it's those kind of things are really cool when they catch your eye. So I think this promotion is doing a couple of good things. What is it doing to Spanish tapas as a concept in Durham, North Carolina, right? We're not talking about downtown Chicago. We're not talking about the cultural meccas of the world. This is Durham, North Carolina. Not the backwater, quote unquote, that it was at one point in time, definitely on the way up, but still not the place you would think of as Spanish tapas being like super popular, right? What's this post doing for that audience is a good question, right? They're keeping it casual. They're keeping it real, right? They're not using a bunch of Spanish terminology. They're using a lot of American words. They're talking about ketchup. They're talking about American cheese, right? So this is something that they're saying, you know what? Spanish tapas is approachable to you from Durham, North Carolina. You don't have to be scared of this stuff. I know that you're not sure what Spanish food is, but we got you. It's good. Come on over, share a plate, have a bottle of wine, be casual. I thought this was a very good post. Anybody disagree with me out there in the audience that hates it?
Well, I've been frantically Googling where I can find a cheeseburger tortilla española.
I think we have to go to Durham, man. And that would be okay with me. I love this restaurant.
It resonated with Laura. She thinks it's a nice contemporary idea that works and could be paired with wine, and keeping it real and making her want to go there are achieved from that post.
Sweet. Well, Mateo and its promotional folks would be very happy to hear that. So let's move into our conclusion, since we're running low on time. You got to express it. Your promise has to be expressed in your promotion clearly, confidently, and efficiently. And the efficiency, I mean, by way of monetary dedication, right? Very few businesses have large promotional budgets. Independent restaurants especially often don't have a promotional budget at all, which, by the way, if you're out there and you're listening and you're an independent restaurateur, I feel your pain. That's the industry I came up in. I totally get the cash flow issues and the struggles that it is to be an independent restaurateur. The things that I would encourage independents is to find the money somewhere. That is not, it is often the first thing that gets cut out of the budget in the independent restaurant world and even in corporate restaurants. It shouldn't be the first thing that gets cut out of the budget, because without an active promotion of who you are and what to expect and why it would be so awesome to be there, you're going to continue to lose clientele, which drives cash flow down even further. I now, at this point in my career especially, I completely disagree with the person I worked for years who said advertising is never worth it. That's not true. It's how you advertise and what channels you choose, and that requires someone to guide you really well. It is often difficult to point directly to the ROI, but I have pointed to failure after failure after failure of businesses who did not share their promise well or at all, and they are not in business anymore. And that's just one of the reasons. I'm sure there are others, but it's a major. So yeah, the channels are dizzying. Social media, print media, magazines versus the online version of the magazine. Newspapers still go out, or the online version of the newspaper. Radio is not dead, despite what a lot of people would tell you, but which station should you be on? And what should your message sound like? And can you afford television? Even in the cable world, maybe you can, but is it going to be worth it? All of those conversations need to happen with somebody who really knows what they're talking about, so that if you dedicate 60, 30, 50, $100,000 to a program, you're doing it the best you can. And that is promotion.
All right. So while we're waiting for any last questions to come in, what's up next in 2 weeks? We're still in the 5 Ps.
In the 5 Ps, we're going to talk about property next. And this is really about what is it supposed to look like to live into your promise. We're definitely going to talk about that. And then the week after, the episode after that, not the week after that, is going to be about the plate, right? And now we're going to get a little upfront and personal about what are the physical things you're offering people, menu items for restaurants, accommodations for hotels, that are supposed to live into your promise.
So please join us for our next on February 23rd at 3 p.m. Thank you, Laura. That's a very kind comment that Laura shared in the chat bar. She says, I wish I had found you sooner. So great point, Laura. All of our past pre-shifts are on our Winebow YouTube channel. Just Google on YouTube, Winebow pre-shift, and you can watch all of the episodes. I don't know how many there are now, Ron, but there's quite a few.
We're in the teens. I want to say it's 18. And
So
especially if you're in the restaurant world and you're now looking at post-COVID, there's a lot of stuff at the very beginning around, training methodologies and attitudes and stuff like that. That's really a great place to start over.
Absolutely. And those are there for any time and anyone. So check those out and join us next time. And until then, be well, stay safe. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Great to have everybody around. See you next time.